Hi, guys. I hope you're well. I had about a 2-hour conversation today with my good friend Robert Barnes. He is the lawyer that I'm kind of partnering with in our legal action against the Fed with the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. So we did a quick update there. We'll probably post the interview tomorrow. But we also talked a lot. We did a huge deep dive on what's happening with the vaccine mandates. And that's been forefront on my mind lately because at the end of the day, if you haven't got freedom, you haven't got anything. And no matter how big your portfolio is, no matter what your net worth is, it doesn't matter if you have no freedom or liberty. And I think that what we've seen in 2020 and 21 should be a stark reminder of just how real that is. And I know it really woke me up because, I'm sure many of you on this live stream right now, your net worth or your portfolio is probably bigger in nominal terms than it was in 2019. But do you have more freedom or less freedom? Obviously, that answers you have less. And even if you say, oh, I don't have less, George, because I live in someplace like Florida. Okay, when's the last time you tried to get a reservation at a restaurant? Do you have access to fewer goods and services or more goods and services? And I would ask that person in Florida, were you able to go to New York City in 2019 without injecting a foreign substance into your body? I think the answer there would be yes. So I don't care where you are on the planet Earth, you have far less freedom today than you did in 2019, regardless of how rich you may think you are. So I talk about quantitative easing, I talk about economics, I talk about investing, I talk about all that stuff. But I also want to make sure that I'm talking about freedom and liberty, because right now our freedom and our liberty is under attack by the global elite and the politicians, the useful idiots. So during that conversation with Barnes, that deep dive on what's happening, I really tried to get to the bottom of why. Most of us, when you kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together and you listen to what the approved narrative is from the CDC or the World Health Organization or the mainstream media, you kind of scratch your head and say, wait a minute, this is something, I don't know, something doesn't make sense here. So then you kind of come to the conclusion that this might not be about health, especially when you realize that the World Health Organization has changed their definition of herd immunity that initially included being vaccinated or having immunity through actually getting the virus, natural immunity. And then they changed it and omitted natural immunity. So the only way we could reach herd immunity was through vaccination. They literally changed their definition of herd immunity once the vaccines came out. Now, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to sit there and scratch your head and say, wait a minute, that's kind of coincidental, isn't it? And then, of course, in December, they changed the definition back because they had so much blowback or complaints from the general public. But it just goes to show you how disingenuous they are. They will blatantly change the definition, the scientific definition of something to fit the political narrative. So anyway, Barnes started talking about the history of eugenics. And really, when you start to understand the concept, well, first and foremost, most people understand what eugenics is and how disgusting it is, and how that led to some of the greatest human atrocities that we have ever witnessed. And you say, oh yeah, George, I get it. You know, that what happened in Germany. Yeah, that was bad. No. I'm not just talking about Germany. I'm talking about what happened right here in the United States. Because most Americans fail to realize or don't like to admit that the one country in the planet Earth where eugenics was most popular in the early 1900s was the good old US of A. And a lot of, call it doctors, a lot of people with influence actively pursued the policies encouraged by eugenics. And so when you sit there and you understand history, and then you look at what the World Economic Forum is saying, and you combine that with the fact that they are openly Marxist, then you start to put two and two together. And although there is no definitive conclusions, you have different options as to what could be going on behind the scenes. So let's go into what eugenics is, so we might be able to connect some dots or come up with some ideas. And again, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying this is what's going on. All I'm trying to do is go through a thought experiment and use critical thinking. I'm trying to not just buy what is being spoon-fed to me by the mainstream media. And I'm trying to get outside of the box. And although this sounds crazy, trust me, it sounds just as crazy to me as it probably sounds to most of you. But I think we don't have to buy into any belief, but we have to keep an open mind. And I think we have to explore what the possibilities could be so that we can eliminate things that are irrational. And then we can focus on what the true possibilities are, and then come to our own conclusions as to what the probabilities are of what's really going on behind the scenes. Because one thing we know is that this is not about health. And anyone that thinks this is about health, I think, honestly, you're just lying to yourself. You're just lying to yourself. I mean, look at the data. Look at the numbers. There you go. Oliver Wendell Holmes upheld compulsory sterilization. Boom. You got it, my friend. You got it. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. So, but again, my point is, even if you're someone that believes I am full of, I've completely lost my mind, I'm a conspiracy theorist, I'm a tinfoil hatter, blah, 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 blah. That's fine. I mean, listen, I've been called worse. But I would just encourage you to keep an open mind and don't just accept the mainstream narrative as the truth. Be skeptical. Try to poke holes in it, and then come to your own conclusions and explore the data on your own. Listen to the smart people that are saying what you believe, but then also listen to the smart people that may be saying something else, or try to. because most of them have been silenced because they didn't have the approved political opinion. So they've been silenced on social media. But regardless, let's go into this blog post from history.com. So let's see if I can expand it or zoom in. Hopefully you guys can read this. Let's see if I can close that. There we go. Okay. Eugenics is the practice or advocacy of improving the human species by selectively mating people with specific desirable hereditary traits. It aims to reduce human suffering by breeding out disease. So the first thing I want to point out is that all of the politicians, and most of them in the United States, favored this and subscribed to this belief system, including the presidents of the United States in the early 1900s. So they believed that by practicing eugenics, that this would be for the greater good. It would improve health. It would improve safety. I mean, it sounds familiar, doesn't it? Let's keep going. Early supporters of eugenics believed people inherited mental illness, criminal tendencies, and even poverty, and that these conditions could be bred out of the gene pool. Historically, eugenics encouraged people of so-called healthy, superior stock to reproduce and discourage reproduction of the mentally challenged, or, listen to this one, anyone who fell outside the social norm. Social norm casts a pretty broad net. That's not a real specific phrase. That could be interpreted to mean a variety of things. What is, quote unquote, the social norm? Eugenics was popular in America during much of the first half of the 20th century. Yet we know where the term became very negative. And that was with, you see it here, with World War II. So the history here is quite fascinating. Eugenics literally means good creation. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato may have been the first person to promote an idea, although the term eugenics did not come onto the scene until the British scholar Sir Francis Galton coined it in 1883. In one of Plato's best-known literary works, The Republic, he wrote about creating a superior society by procreating high-class people together and discouraging coupling between the lower classes. Now, I want to ask all of you on this live stream right now, how many people do we have? We have 300 people on the live stream. After reading that, what would you say the probabilities are that the global elite believe this is true? Let me just reread it so we're all on the same page here. In one of Plato's best-known literary works, The Republic, he wrote about creating a superior society by procreating high-class people together and discouraging coupling between the lower classes. He also suggested a variety of mating rules to help create an optimal society. Now, I would ask you again, you guys have heard the people, the global elites, the people at the World Economic Forum, the IMF, the politicians, you've heard them talk. And it's always condescending. It has that condescending overtone. What do you think the probabilities are that these global elite think that they are superior to the average Joe and Jane? What do you think the probabilities are that these global elite think that if they had all the power, because they're intellectually superior, that would be for the greater good of all society? I think the probabilities are high. No, definitely not 100%, but just listen to what they say and how they say it. I don't think it's too far of a stretch to assume they believe they're superior to the average Joe and Jane. So let's keep going here, because I'm gonna start connecting some dots for sure. Eugenics made its first official appearance in American history through marriage laws in 1896. Connecticut made it illegal for people with epilepsy or who were feeble-minded to marry. In 1903, the American Breeders Association was created to study eugenics. Kellogg, of the cereal Kellogg, organized the Race Betterment Foundation in 1911 and established a pedigree registry. The foundation hosted national conferences on eugenics in 1914, 15, and 1928. Interesting. Something else was established in 1914. What was that? Anyone on the live stream know? What else was established in 1914? I'll look at the chat stream here. The Fed. You got it. Nailed it. The Fed. That's right. So moving on, as the concept of eugenics hold prominent citizen scientists. Remember, so all those people that are for vaccine mandates, they all say people who are opposed to a vaccine mandate, well, you're just anti-science. Well, you're just anti-science. Well, what they don't realize is if you study history, often people who are anti-science were incredibly correct. And if you would have been anti-science many, many, many times in history, you would have taken the ethical high ground, to say the least. You would have been proven correct. So let's go over this again. As a concept, eugenics could hold prominent citizen scientists and socialists championed. Let's go over this. I hope you guys heard that. Scientists and socialists championed the cause and established the Eugenics Record Office. The office tracked families and their genetic traits, claiming most people considered unfit were immigrants, minorities, or the poor. So who, just to be clear, who championed that? That would have been the scientists, right? And the socialists. So all these people today that are so proud of themselves because they're quote unquote following the science, well, all those people would have been for eugenics back in the early 1900s. That would have been following the science. So they use that you're anti-science. They use that as a derogatory term. But I think most often, if you study history, that was actually a compliment. It was definitely a compliment from a standpoint of ethics and morals when we look at the early 1900s. The Eugenics Record Office, again, set up by the scientists and who else? The socialists. And who is really, really pushing the vaccine mandates? Is it the people that are really champions of free market capitalism? Or is it the people that claim to be socialists or claim to be in favor of stakeholder capitalism or favor central planning and Marxism? These are the people that set up the Eugenics Record Office. Also maintained there was clear evidence that supposed negative family traits were caused by bad genes, not racism, economics, or social views of the time, but bad genes. So if you could just weed out those bad genes, it would be for the greater good. It would improve health. It would improve safety. So why would you not make it mandatory? Why? It's the exact same argument you have today for the vaccine mandates that they have in New York City. It's for the greater good. It's for everyone's health. It makes us safer. They had the exact same argument for eugenics in the early 1900s. Identical. And back there, they didn't have, it wasn't about vaccine passports, but this is what they did. Forced sterilizations. Well, that solves the problem. But remember, what was the argument for forced sterilizations? The greater good, health, safety. Eugenics in America took a dark turn in the early 20th century, led by California. Ironic. From 1909 to 1979, around 20,000 sterilizations occurred in California state mental institutions under the guise of protecting society from the offspring of people with mental illness. Protecting society. Why do we need vaccine mandates? Why do we need vaccine passports? Well, duh. It's to protect society. You see? This is why I always say that I'm not anti-vaccination. I'm pro-freedom. And what the people who are pro-lockdown or pro-government restriction or pro-government interference in business or pro-mandates, what they do or what they have a hard time doing is a cost-benefit analysis. They look at the benefit, perceived safety, in protecting society, but they omit the cost. And what's ironic is that anyone that would look at this, I don't care what your political leaning is today, would say that I don't care how forced sterilizations, I don't care what the argument is for them protecting society, the cost is not worth any perceived benefit from an ethical or moral standpoint. But yet those same people cannot and refuse to do the same cost-benefit analysis today. Many sterilizations were forced and performed on minorities. 33 states would eventually allow involuntary sterilization in whomever lawmakers deemed unworthy to procreate. In 1927, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that forced sterilizations of the handicapped does not violate the U.S. Constitution. In the words of Supreme Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. In 1942, the ruling was overturned, but not before thousands of people underwent the procedure of forced sterilization. And good old Puerto Rico was in the mix as well. In the 1930s, Governor of Puerto Rico, Mendez Ramos, implemented sterilization programs for Puerto Rican women. Ramos claimed the action was needed to better rampant poverty and economic strife. However, it may also been a way to prevent the so-called superior Aryan gene pool from becoming tainted with Latino blood. Unbelievable. According to 1976 Government Accountability Office investigation, between 25 and 50% of Native Americans were sterilized between 1970 and 1976. It's thought some sterilization happened without consent during other surgical procedures, such as an appendectomy. I want to read that last part one more time. It's thought some sterilizations happened without consent. I'll let you draw your own conclusions there on how that could be applicable. Maybe to a vaccine that we don't know what the long-term side effects are. I'm not asserting anything. I'm saying, let's just think about this critically. Let's just put all the options on the table, and then let's just narrow down the options based on studying history and looking at the facts. In some cases, health care for living children was denied unless their mothers agreed to sterilization. And we know what happened here with this individual and eugenics. But I want to point out that this individual didn't come up with the concept, or didn't come up with his concepts all on his own. In fact, he referred to American eugenics in his very famous book. I'm not even going to read about this guy because it's just disgusting. And of course, there is a push, or there is a group of individuals who are still into eugenics. Now, they may claim, and maybe rightfully so, that this has nothing to do with the eugenics of the early 1900s. But let's go ahead and connect some dots here. The one thing we do know definitively is the global elite, the World Economic Forum, all of those corporate CEOs that have drank the Klaus Kool-Aid and the Prince Charles crowd and all the World Health Organization, the IMF, They're all central planners. They favor central planning. So why would someone favor central planning? Why? Well, most likely it's because they think that there's a group of individuals, a group of human beings on this planet Earth that are intellectually superior to the rest of humanity. And because they are superior, it would benefit society at large if they had control of everything. That's pretty much at the heart of central planning. Like, it's tough to believe in central planning and not to believe that your ideas or you as a human being is superior to other individuals, the average Joe and Jane, and therefore you should have control because those people are just too dumb to manage themselves. Let's look at de Blasio, right? What is a vaccine mandate really saying? It's basically saying that there's a group of Americans that are just too stupid to make their own decision because they're coming to the conclusion that they don't want a vaccine. And that in and of itself just proves how dumb they are and that they cannot be trusted to make the right decision. And therefore, we need to force the decision upon them. Therefore, we elite, the enlightened, the intelligentsia, as Thomas Sowell refers to them, we need to force the dumb idiots, the rubes, the imbeciles that are too ignorant to take the vaccine. We need to force them to take it. This is at the heart of central planning and people who believe in central planning, people who are really socialists, right? Who believe that a small group of individuals should control the means of production, right? So the problem with building this, let's call it a communist utopia, is, I think the global elite have to understand this, is that you have to fundamentally change the hardwiring of human beings, because human beings are hardwired to pursue their own self-interest and the interests of their own families. First and foremost, it's the invisible hand of Adam Smith. And if you think about it, and you look at your own life or your friends, this is unequivocally true, that human beings, first and foremost, pursue their own self-interest. Now, it doesn't mean that every human being's greedy, doesn't give to charity. No. It's just that first, you're going to pursue your own self-interest and the interests of your family, your wife, your husband, your kids. Everything else is secondary. But unfortunately, you can't have that hardwiring if you're trying to build a socialist utopia. Because the socialist utopia takes the emphasis off of the individual and puts it onto society at large. Therefore, all you is just a cog in a machine. You're just a widget. You're just a worker. That's it. And your sole purpose on this planet is just to go to work every single day, behave, because at the end of the day, it's for the greater good. So how do you rewire human beings? They tried it in Russia. Didn't work very well. They tried it in China. Didn't work very well. They've tried it in a lot of places. Doesn't really work. But maybe if you could take a group of people that were prone to be obedient and that didn't really think through things critically, didn't want to think through things critically. If you had a group of human beings that preferred safety over freedom, and I'm not saying this is true, by the way, this is not George Gammon talking. I want to make that very, very clear. But if you believed in eugenics, and if you believed in central planning, if you believed in socialism, if you believed in Marxism, if you believed that you were superior to everyone else, therefore you should be controlling society for the benefit of society, then the next logical step is that you need to segregate society so you can have all those people that are susceptible to, I don't want to say susceptible to being re-hardwired, but are susceptible to obedience, or who are prone to obedience. If you could separate those people from all those others that were off in District 13, the rebels, the people who are always up to no good, the people who are skeptical, the people who used critical thinking, the people who didn't want to be controlled, the people who valued freedom and liberty, the people who wanted freedom and valued freedom over perceived safety, the people who wanted to be left alone, the people who didn't want government to control them, the people who didn't want the central planners to rule over them and micromanage their lives. If you could just separate those two groups of people, then it would be far easier to control the people who are prone to being obedient. And then the people that were prone to being obedient would have kids, and then they would be obedient. It's like magic. It's just so simple. Again, I want to be very, very clear. This is not George Gammon. This is not what I believe. I'm just going through a thought experiment of what could potentially go through the mind of an individual who felt as though they were superior and enlightened and believed in Marxism, believed in central planning, and also believed or saw merit in eugenics. Is it what I'm trying to do is go through what their thought process could be. I'm not saying this is their thought process. I'm saying what it could be, what it could be. And again, what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is just get all the possibilities out on the table and think through each possibility using facts, looking at history, using critical thinking, and then eliminate all the things that just don't make sense. And maybe this is one idea that at the end of the day will not make sense. I don't know. But I think it's something that I at least want to explore. So again, just to reiterate here, this is what I'm thinking through. You've got the central planners. They believe they're better than everyone else. They believe in Marxism, but they also want to build this socialist utopia. They realize the only way to do that is to kind of re-hardwire people, for lack of a better word. Well, that's been tried in the past. It doesn't work very well. So the second best option is just to divide people into two groups of people. A, those who are prone to being obedient and lack critical thinking, and then the others who are more rebellious, who aren't going to obey, who are always going to pursue freedom in their own self-interest and believe in self-reliance and don't want to be attached or controlled or ruled by the government. You've got it. You separate those people, and then you specifically focus on the individuals who are ready and willing to obey. Maybe it's because they're getting UBI. Maybe it's because they value safety or perceived safety far more than they value freedom. I don't know. But if you're able to separate those people, then it's taking you one step closer to your objective of creating, for a certain percentage of the population, this socialist utopia. So then the question becomes, how on earth do you separate people? How do you segregate people? How would you do that? How would you segregate people who were prone to obedience from those who were prone to critical thinking and prone to independence? Maybe that's a better way to say it. How would you separate the people who are prone to obedience and the people who are prone to independence? I don't know. Maybe you could just come up with something like a vaccine and make it mandatory for people to go into restaurants, gyms, to participate in society. Make it mandatory for them to take it. And then why don't you also create a vaccine that really hasn't been proven, that hasn't been tested, that's experimental, and then just see who takes it and who doesn't. And then what you could do through mandates is all of the people who didn't want to take it, all those people who were, let's say, valued independence, they would have to go out into District 13. And then what you would have over a very short period of time is you would have people segregate themselves into groups based on their belief system or belief systems. So again, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying this is what is happening. I'm saying that what we know is the global elite are Marxists. We know that. They're central planners. Then we know that central planners believe that they are enlightened or intellectually superior compared to the average Joe and Jane, and that they believe that if they control things, it's going to be better for society. That we know definitively. What we also know definitively is that there's something going on right now with these restrictions and mandates that is above and beyond just simply health concerns. We also know that eugenics was extremely popular with the scientists and the socialists in the early 1900s, right here in the good old US of A. So I'm not going to rant on. I just wanted to bring that to your attention so that you could think through it and come to your own conclusions. I don't want to persuade you of anything. I just want to bring things to your attention so that you can use your own critical thinking and determine the probabilities of what you think is going on, and therefore take action around what you see is most probable to play out in the future. Because the one thing we don't want to do is just bury our head in the sand. The one thing that we don't want to do is just be one of those people in East Germany that while they were watching the wall being built around them, just didn't care because they're too busy dealing with work. They're too busy dealing with their kids. They're too busy dealing with their soccer, taking their kids to soccer practice. I don't have time to think about that wall that they're building around the city. I trust the politicians. They're not crazy. Now, they're doing this for my good. They're doing this for the greater good. They're doing it for safety. They're doing it to protect us. I'm not going to listen to any of these crazy tinfoil hatters or conspiracy theorists that are saying that they're building this wall to keep us in. That's all nonsense. I trust our leaders. I trust that they're doing what's right for us and what's right for me and my family. And I'm going to put my faith in the central planners. And I'm just going to go on living my life. And I'm not going to live in fear and anxiety and any of these crazy things like some of these people around me. I'm not going to worry about that wall. I'm just going to live my life. That's the individual that we do not want to be. So I'm going to leave it at that. Let me do some shout outs and continue to think through this. And hopefully I can poke holes in some of my own thoughts so that I can continue to refine the way I see the world and to crystallize my own ideas so that I can come to some conclusions that actually make sense, that I believe to have a high probability of being reality. And it's the exact same process that I used when I was thinking about the central bank digital currencies. Remember, for those of you who might have been following the George Gammon channel for quite some time, you remember that I've been talking about central bank digital currencies since 2019. And back then, everyone was calling me a tinfoil hatter and a conspiracy theorist for even implying that we could have some sort of Fed coin. That's never going to happen, George. That's ridiculous. But why was I so adamant about the Fed coin? Because I went through the same process. I threw everything out on the table and I tried to use critical thinking and come to the conclusion on what makes most sense through the process of elimination. And when you think about inflation, when you think about the fact that the Fed doesn't control the dollar, when you put all these pieces of the puzzle together, it brings you to one conclusion, and that's central bank digital currency. But I still maintained that it wasn't a certainty, that it was only a matter of probabilities. I just thought the probability was high. And it's the exact same process I'm going through now. And I'm just bringing you guys along with me. So hopefully as a community, we can make some, not necessarily good decisions, but as a community, we can think through this together and we can really come and we can come to some conclusions on what the most probable, what the motivation and the incentives are behind what's going on with these government restrictions and mandates. We can come to a conclusion on what is most probable. Because again, one other thing that we know definitively is that there is more to this than just health. And anyone that looks at the what's the CDC or the WHO and how they've contradicted themselves over and over and over and over and over again. Anyone, I don't care what you believe in, what your political leanings are, you have to scratch your head and say, wait a minute, this does not pass the sniff test. All right, let me go ahead and do some shout outs and I'll let you guys go back to enjoying your evening. We've got Matthew Silva in the house. We've got Angelique in the house. Jeremy, I Aya B, Matthew Silva. I think I just said Matthew, didn't I? Dr. Dryden 1, Zach Clark, Daniel J, Bulldog, Wayne Smith, Mike Horseman, All-Nighter Hider in the house, M9, Rolf Steiner, No Longer Have Kuth, Benjamin Kopke, Danny Blossom, Wayne Smith, Lisa G. Okay, and Anthony Anthony Captain, thank you for the super chat, buddy. You don't have to do that, but I sincerely appreciate it. We got Miku in the house. Cabragoon Capulus. Celeste August. Think and Grow Rich, Lori Stevens. The Reign of Zero, Bloodbath McGrath, RR, Double Dog Blitz, Quantitative Disease, Magnetizer. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you on the next video. I'm going to keep thinking through this stuff, and hopefully I can refine my ideas and present those to you tomorrow. We'll see you then.